Troy was a city well known to both history and legend, and situated in northwest Anatolia in what is now Turkey, south of the southwest end of the Dardanelles Hellespont and northwest of Mount Ida. It is best known for being the setting of the Trojan War described in the Greek epic cycle and especially in the Iliad, one of the two epic poems attributed to Homer. Metrical evidence from the Iliad and the Odyssey seems to show that the name I to the first I1/2 formerly began with a digamma, I to the first I1/2. This was later supported by the Hittite form Wilusa. A new city called Ilium was founded on the site in the reign of the Roman Emperor Augustus. It flourished until the establishment of Constantinople and declined gradually during the Byzantine era. In 1865, English archaeologist Frank Calvert excavated trial trenches in a field he had bought from a local farmer at Hisala ±K, and in 1868, Heinrich Schliemann, wealthy German businessman and archaeologist, also began excavating in the area after a chance meeting with Calvert in Anatolia. These excavations revealed several cities built in succession. Schliemann was at first skeptical about the identification of Hisarlik with Troy, but was persuaded by Calvert and took over Calvert's excavations on the eastern half of the Hisarlik site, which was on Calvert's property. Troy 7 has been identified with the Hittite city Wilusa, the probable origin of the Greek I to the first I1/2, and is generally identified with Homeric Troy. Today, the hill at Hisarlik has given its name to a small village near the ruins, supporting the tourist trade visiting the Troia archaeological site. It lies within the province of Anatolia, some 30 km southwest of the provincial capital, also called Anatolia. The nearest village is Tevikai. The map here shows the adapted Scamander estuary with Ilium a little way inland across the Homeric plain. Troia was added to the UNESCO World Heritage List in 1998. Homeric Troy. Ancient Greek historians variously placed the Trojan War in the 12th, 13th, or 14th centuries BC, Eratosthenes to 1184 BC, Herodotus to 1250 BC, Duras of Samos to 1334 BC. Modern archaeologists associate Homeric Troy with archaeological Troy 7. In the Iliad, the Achaeans set up their camp near the mouth of the river Scamander, where they had beached their ships. The city of Troy itself stood on a hill, across the plain of Scamander, where the battles of the Trojan War took place. The site of the ancient city is some 5 km from the coast today, but the ancient mouths of Scamander, some 3,000 years ago, were about the distance inland, pouring into a large bay forming a natural harbour that has since been filled with alluvial material. Recent geological findings have permitted the reconstruction of how the original Trojan coastline would have looked, and the results largely confirm the accuracy of the Homeric geography of Troy. In November 2001, geologists John C. Kraft from the University of Delaware and John V. Luce from Trinity College, Dublin presented the results of investigations, begun in 1977, into the geology of the region. They compared the present geology with the landscapes and coastal features described in the Iliad and other classical sources, notably Strabo's Geographia, and concluded that there is a regular consistency between the location of Schliemann's Troy and other locations such as the Greek camp, the geological evidence, descriptions of the topography and accounts of the battle in the Iliad. Besides the Iliad, there are references to Troy in the other major work attributed to Homer, the Odyssey, as well as in other ancient Greek literature. The Homeric legend of Troy was elaborated by the Roman poet Virgil in his Aeneid. The Greeks and Romans took for a fact the historicity of the Trojan War and the identity of Homeric Troy with the site in Anatolia. Alexander the Great, for example, visited the site in 334 BC and made sacrifices at tombs there associated with the Homeric heroes Achilles and Patroclus. After the 1995 find of a Loon biconvex seal at Troy 7, there has been a heated discussion over the language that was spoken in Homeric Troy. Frank Stark of the University of Tarbingen recently demonstrated that the name of Priam, king of Troy at the time of the Trojan War, is connected to the Loon compound primua, which means exceptionally courageous. The certainty is growing that Wilusa Troy belonged to the greater Loon-speaking community, although it is not entirely clear whether Luan was primarily the official language or in daily colloquial use. Chronology in the search for Homeric Troy. Initially, the layers of Troy 6 and 7 were overlooked entirely, because Schliemann favored the burnt city of Troy too. It was not until the need to close Calvert's thousand-year gap from Dar paragraph a PFELD's discovery of the walls of Troy viaduct that archaeology turned away from Schliemann's Troy and began working towards finding Homeric Troy once more. Calvert's thousand-year gap, part of the city's archaeological chronology, occurred during what is called Calvert's thousand-year gap, a period not accounted for by Schliemann's archaeology and thus constituting a hole in the Trojan timeline. In Homer's description of the city, a section of one side of the wall is said to be weaker than the rest. During his excavation of more than 300 yards of the wall, Dar paragraph a PFELD came across a section very closely resembling the Homeric description of the weaker section. Dar paragraph a PFELD was convinced he had found the walls of Homer's city, and now he would excavate the city itself. Within the walls of this stratum, much Mycenaean pottery dating from LH 3A and 3B was uncovered, suggesting a relation between the Trojans and Mycenaeans. The Great Tower along the walls seemed likely to be the Great Tower of Ilios. The evidence seemed to indicate that Dar paragraph a PFELD had stumbled upon Ilios, the city of Homer's epics. Schliemann himself had conceded that Troy 6 was more likely to be the Homeric city, but he never published anything stating so. The only counter-argument, confirmed initially by Dar paragraph a PFELD, was that the city appeared to have been destroyed by an earthquake, not by men. There was little doubt that this was the Troy that the Mycenaeans would have known of. Archaeological Troy. The layers of ruins in the citadel at Hisala ±K are numbered Troia Troy 9, with various subdivisions, Troy 3000 2600 BC, Troy 2 2600 2250 BC, Troy 3 2250 2100 BC, Troy 4 2100 1950 BC, Troy v. 20th -18th centuries BC, Troy 6, 17th -15th centuries BC, Troy v. Late Bronze Age, 14th century BC, Troy via c. 1300 1190 BC, most likely setting for Homer's story, Troy Vibe 1, 12th century BC, Troy Vibe 2, 11th century BC, Troy Vibe 3, until c. 950 BC, Troy 8, c. 700 85 BC, Troy 9, 85 BC c. AD 500, the archaeological site of Troy was added to the UNESCO World Heritage List in 1998. Troia v. The first city on the site was founded in the 3rd millennium BC. During the Bronze Age, the site seems to have been a flourishing mercantile city, since its location allowed for complete control of the Dardanelles, through which every merchant ship from the Aegean Sea heading for the Black Sea had to pass. Around 1900 BC a mass migration was set off by the Hittites to the east. Cities to the east of Troy were destroyed, and although Troy was not burned, the next period shows a change of culture indicating a new people had taken over Troy. Schliemann's Troy II. When Schliemann came across Troy II, in 1871, he believed he had found Homer's city. Schliemann and his team unearthed a large feature he dubbed the Steine Gate, a western gate unlike the three previously found leading to the Pergamos. This gate, as he describes, was the gate that Homer had featured. As Schliemann states in his publication Troja, I have proved that in a remote antiquity there was in the plain of Troy a large city, destroyed of old by a fearful catastrophe, which had on the hill of Hisala ±K only its Acropolis with its temples and a few other large edifices, southerly and westerly direction on the site of the later Ilium. And that, consequently, this city answers perfectly to the Homeric description of the sacred site of Ilios. Troy 6 was destroyed around 1250 BC, probably by an earthquake. Only a single arrowhead was found in this lair, and no remains of bodies. However, the town quickly recovered and was rebuilt in a layout that was more orderly. Troy 7, which has been dated to the mid to late 13th century BC, is the most often cited candidate for the Troy of Homer. It appears to have been destroyed by war. The evidence of fire and slaughter around 1184 BC, which brought Troia to a close, led to this phase being identified with a city besieged by the Greeks during the Trojan War. This was immortalized in the Iliad written by Homer. Troy 8. In 480 the Persian king Xerxes sacrificed 1,000 cattle at the sanctuary of Athena Ilios while marching through the Hellespontian region towards Greece. Following the Persian defeat in 480-79 Ilion and its territory became part of the continental possessions of Mytilene and remained under Mytilenean control until the unsuccessful Mytilenean revolt in 428 July. Athens liberated the so-called Actrian cities including Ilion and enrolled these communities in the Delian League. Athenian influence in the Hellespont waned following the oligarchic coup of 411, and in that year the Spartan general Mindarus emulated Xerxes by likewise sacrificing to Athena Ilios. From c. 410-399 Ilion was within the sphere of influence of the local dynasts at Lampsacus who administered the region on behalf of the Persian satrap Pharnabazus. In 399 the Spartan general Dercyllidas expelled the Greek garrison at Ilion who were controlling the city on behalf of the Lampsacene Dianths during a campaign which rolled back Persian influence throughout the Troad. Ilion remained outside the control of the Persian satrapal administration at Dascylion until the Peace of Antalcidas in 387 June. In this period of renewed Persian control c. 387-367, a statue of Ariobarzanes, the satrap of Hellespontine Phrygia, was erected in front of the temple of Athena Ilios. In 360-59 the city was briefly controlled by Charidmus of Arius, a Eubaulian mercenary leader who occasionally worked for the Athenians. In 359 he was expelled by the Athenian Menelaus son of Arrhabaeus, whom the Ilians honored with a grant of proxy. This is recorded in the earliest civic decree to survive from Ilion. In May 334 Alexander the Great crossed the Hellespont and came to the city, where he visited the temple of Athena Ilios, made sacrifices at the tombs of the Homeric heroes, and made the city free and exempt from taxes. According to the so-called last plans of Alexander which became known after his death in June 323, he had planned to rebuild the temple of Athena Ilios on a scale that would have surpassed every other temple in the known world. Antigonus Monophthalmus took control of the Troad in 311 and created the new city of Antigonia Troas which was a Cyanoicism of the cities of Skepsis, Cabrene, Neandria, Hamaxitos, Larisa, and Coloni. In c. 311-306 the koinon of Athena Ilios was founded from the remaining cities in the Troad and along the Asian coast of the Dardanelles and soon after succeeded in securing a guarantee from Antigonus that he would respect their autonomy and freedom. The koinon continued to function until at least the 1st century AD and primarily consisted of cities from the Troad, although for a time in the second half of the 3rd century it also included Mali and Chalcedon from the eastern Propontis. The governing body of the koinon was the Synedrion on which each city was represented by 2 delegates. The day-to-day running of the Synedrion, especially in relation to its finances, was left to a college of 5 agonothetae, on which no city ever had more than 1 representative. This system of equal representation ensured that no one city could politically dominate the koinon. The primary purpose of the koinon was to organize the annual Panathenaea festival which was held at the sanctuary of Athena Ilios. The festival brought huge numbers of pilgrims to Ilion for the duration of the festival as well as creating an enormous market which attracted traders from across the region. In addition, the koinon financed new building projects at Ilion, for example a new theatre c. 306 and the expansion of the sanctuary and temple of Athena Ilios in the 3rd century, in order to make the city a suitable venue for such a large festival. In the period 302-281 Ilion and the Troad were part of the kingdom of Lysimachus, who during this time helped Ilion cyanoicize several nearby communities, thus expanding the city's population and territory. Lysimachus was defeated at the Battle of Crupedium in February 281 by Seleucus I Nicator, thus handing the Seleucid kingdom control of Asia Minor, and in August or September of 281 when Seleucus passed through the Troad on his way to Lysimachia in the nearby Thracian Chersonese Ilion passed a decree in honor of him, indicating the city's new loyalties. In September Seleucus was assassinated at Lysimachia by Ptolemy Keraurnos, making his successor, Antiochus I Soter, the new king. In 280 or soon after Ilion passed along decree lavishly honoring Antiochus in order to cement their relationship with him. During this period Ilion still lacked proper city walls except for the crumbling Troy 6 fortifications around the citadel, and in 278 during the Gallic invasion the city was easily sacked. Ilion enjoyed a close relationship with Antiochus for the rest of his reign. For example, in 274 Antiochus granted land to his friend Aristodechides of Assos which for tax purposes was to be attached to the territory of Ilion, and c. 275-269 Ilion passed a decree in honor of Metrodorus of Amphipolis who had successfully treated the king for a wound he received in battle. Troy 9. The city was destroyed by Sulla's rival, the Roman general Fimbria, in 85 BC following an 11-day siege. Later that year when Sulla had defeated Fimbria he bestowed benefactions on Ilion for its loyalty which helped with the city's rebuilding. Ilion reciprocated this act of generosity by instituting a new civic calendar which took 85 BC as its first year. However, the city remained in financial distress for several decades, despite its favored status with Rome. In the 80s BC Roman publicani illegally levied taxes on the sacred estates of Athena Ilios and the city was required to call on L. Julius Caesar for restitution, while in 80 BC the city suffered an attack by pirates. In 77 BC the costs of running the annual festival of the Koinon of Athena Ilios became too pressing for both Ilion and the other members of the Koinon and L. Julius Caesar was once again required to arbitrate, this time reforming the festival so that it would be less of a financial burden. In 74 BC the Ilions once again demonstrated their loyalty to Rome by siding with the Roman general Lucullus against Mithridates VI. Following the final defeat of Mithridates in 63 February, Pompey rewarded the city's loyalty by becoming the benefactor of Ilion and patron of Athena Ilios. In 48 BC Julius Caesar likewise bestowed benefactions on the city, recalling the city's loyalty during the Mithridatic Wars, the city's connection with his cousin L. Julius Caesar, and the family's claim that they were ultimately descended from Venus through the Trojan prince Aeneas and therefore shared kinship with the Ilions. In 20 BC the Emperor Augustus visited Ilion and stayed in the house of a leading citizen, Melanippes son of Euthydemus. As a result of his visit he also financed the restoration and rebuilding of the sanctuary of Athena Ilios, the Bouleuterion, and the theatre. Soon after work on the theatre was completed in December 11 BC, Melanippes dedicated a statue of Augustus in the theatre to record this benefaction. Excavation campaigns. With the rise of critical history, Troy and the Trojan War were, for a long time, consigned to the realms of legend. However, the true location of ancient Troy had from classical times remained the subject of interest and speculation, so when, in 1822, the Scottish journalist Charles MacLaren reviewed the available material, he was able to identify with confidence the position of the Acropolis of Augustus's new Ilium in northwestern Anatolia. In 1866, Frank Calvert, the brother of the United States consular agent in the region, made extensive surveys and published in scholarly journals his identification of the hill of New Ilium as the site of ancient Troy. The hill, near the city of Anatolia, was known to the Turks as Hisarlik ±K. Schliemann, in 1868, Heinrich Schliemann visited Calvert and secured permission to excavate Hisarlik ±K. In 1871 €73 and 1878 €79, he excavated the hill and discovered the ruins of a series of ancient cities dating from the Bronze Age to the Roman period. Schliemann declared one of these cities at first Troy I, later Troy II to be the city of Troy, and this identification was widely accepted at that time. Schliemann's finds at Hisarlik ±K have become known as Priam's treasure. They were acquired from him by the Berlin museums, but significant doubts about their authenticity persist. Although it is widely believed that Heinrich Schliemann was responsible for starting archaeology on his own with the discovery of Troy, This is inaccurate. Schliemann became interested in digging at the mound of Hisarlik ±K at the persuasion of Frank Calvert. The British diplomat, considered a pioneer for the contributions he made to the archaeology of Troy, spent more than 60 years in the Troad conducting field work. As a principal authority on field archaeology in the region, Calvert's findings supplied evidence that Homeric Troy might exist in the hill, playing a major role in directing Heinrich Schliemann to dig at the Hisarlik ±K. Dar paragraph a PFELD and Legend, after Schliemann, the site was further excavated under the direction of Wilhelm Dar paragraph a PFELD and later Karl Blegen. These excavations have shown that there were at least 9 cities built, one on top of each other, at this site. In his research, Blegen came to a conclusion that Troy's 9 levels could be further divided into 46 sublevels. Kaufmann, in 1988, excavations were resumed by a team of the University of Tarbes-Bingen and the University of Cincinnati under the direction of Professor Manfred Kaufmann, with Professor Brian Rose overseeing post-Bronze Age excavation along the coast of the Aegean Sea at the Bay of Troy. Possible evidence of a battle was found in the form of bronze arrowheads and fire-damaged human remains buried in layers dated to the early 12th century BC. The question of Troy's status in the Bronze Age world has been the subject of a sometimes acerbic debate between Kaufmann and the Tarbes-Bingen historian Frank Kolb in 2001–2002. In August 1993, following a magnetic imaging survey of the fields below the fort, a deep ditch was located and excavated among the ruins of a later Greek and Roman city. Remains found in the ditch were dated to the Late Bronze Age, the alleged time of Homeric Troy. It is claimed by Kaufmann that the ditch may have once marked the outer defences of a much larger city than had previously been suspected. The latter city has been dated by his team to about 1250 BC, and it has been also suggested based on recent archaeological evidence uncovered by Professor Manfred Kaufmann's team that this was indeed the Homeric city of Troy. Pinnaker, in summer 2006, the excavations continued under the direction of Kaufmann's colleague Ernst Pinnaker, with a new digging permit. 2013 to 2014, an international team made up of cross-disciplinary experts led by William Aylward, an archaeologist at the University of Wisconsin, was to carry out excavations in 2013. This was to be conducted under the auspices of Anatolia University and was to use the new technique of molecular archaeology. A few days before the Wisconsin team was to leave, Turkey cancelled about 100 excavation permits, including Wisconsin's. In March 2014 it was announced that a new excavation would take place to be sponsored by a private company and carried out by Anatolia University. This will be the first Turkish team to excavate and is planned as a 12-month excavation led by Associate Professor Arwan Kortastem Aslan. The university's rector stated that pieces unearthed in Troy will contribute to Anatolia unregistered trademark culture and tourism. Maybe it will become one of Turkey unregistered trademark most important frequented historical places. Hittite and Egyptian evidence. In the 1920s, the Swiss scholar Emil Forer claimed that the placer names Wilusa and Truwisa found in Hittite texts should be identified with Ilion and Troia, respectively. He further noted that the name of Alexandru, a king of Wilusa mentioned in a Hittite treaty, is quite similar to Homer's Paris, whose birth name was Alexandros. Subsequent to this, the Torgalawa letter was found to document an unnamed Hittite king's correspondence to the king of the Arewa, referring to an earlier Wilusa episode involving hostility on the part of the Arewa. The Hittite king was long held to be Mursalite too, but, since the 1980s, his son Hattusili III is commonly preferred, although his other son Muatali remains a possibility. Inscriptions of the New Kingdom of Egypt also record in ancient TRS as one of the Sea peoples who attacked Egypt during the 19 and 20 dynasties. An inscription at Dur el-Medina records a victory of Rameses III over the Sea peoples, including one named Tertia. It is probably the same as the earlier Teresh on the stele commemorating Meneptah's victory in a Libyan campaign around 1220 BC. These identifications were rejected by many scholars as being improbable or at least unprovable. However, Trevor Bryce championed them in his 1998 book The Kingdom of the Hittites, citing a piece of the Manapatahunda letter referring to the kingdom of Wilusa as beyond the land of the Shia River and near the land of Laspot. Recent evidence also adds weight to the theory that Wilusa is identical to archaeological Troy. Hittite texts mention a water tunnel at Wilusa, and a water tunnel excavated by Kaufman, previously thought to be Roman, has been dated to around 2600 BC. The identifications of Wilusa with Troy and of the Iliad with Homer's Achaeans remain somewhat controversial but gained enough popularity during the 1990s to be considered majority opinion. In later legend, such was the fame of the epic cycle in Roman and medieval times that it was built upon to provide a starting point for various founding myths of national origins. The most influential, Virgil's Aeneid, traces the journeys of the Trojan prince Aeneas, supposed ancestor of the founders of Rome and the Julio-Claudian dynasty. In a later era, the heroes of Troy, both those noted in Homer and those invented for the purpose, often continued to appear in the origin stories of the nations of early medieval Europe. The Roman de Troy was common cultural ground for European dynasties, as a Trojan pedigree was both gloriously ancient and established an equality with the ruling class of Rome. A Trojan pedigree could justify the occupation of parts of Rome's former territories. On that basis, the Franks filled the lacunae of their legendary origins with Trojan and pseudo-Trojan names. In Fredega's 7th-century chronicle of Frankish history, Priam appears as the first king of the Franks. The Trojan origin of France was such an established article of faith that in 1714, the learned Nicholas Frere copyright was bastilled for showing through historical criticism that the Franks had been Germanic, a sore point counter to Vaulois and Bourbon propaganda. In similar manner, Geoffrey of Monmouth reworked earlier material such as the Historia Britonum to trace the legendary kings of the Britons from a supposed descendant of Aeneas called Brutus. Likewise, Snorri Sturluson, in the prologue to his Icelandic prose Edda, traced the genealogy of the ancestral figures in Norse mythology to characters appearing at Troy in Homer's epic, notably making Thor to be the son of Memnon. Sturluson referred to these figures as having made a journey across Europe towards Scandinavia, setting up kingdoms as they went. Alternative views on Troy. A small minority of contemporary writers argue that Homeric Troy was not in Anatolia, but located elsewhere. England, Croatia, and Scandinavia have been proposed. These theories have no historical basis and have not been accepted by mainstream scholars. See also, Ancient settlements in Turkey, cities of the ancient Near East, Dardanelles, the Golden Bough, historicity of the Iliad, Trojan language, Trojan War, notes. References, Allon, Susan. Finding the Walls of Troy Frank Calvert, Excavator. American Journal of Archaeology 99, 379 €407. Retrieved January 30, 2013. Bauer, Susan Wise. The Battle for Troy. The History of the Ancient World, from the Earliest Accounts to the Fall of Rome. Norton ppA 253 €58. ISBN A9780393070897 Carter, Jane Burr. Morris, Sarah P., eds. The Ages of Homer. Austin, University of Texas Press. ISBN A0-292-71208-1 Easton, D.F. Hawkins, J.D. Sherratt, A.G. Sherratt, E.S. Troy in Recent Perspective. Anatolian Studies, 75 €109. Latach, Joachim. Troy and Homer, Towards a Solution of an Old Mystery. Oxford, Oxford University Press. ISBN A0-19-926308-6 Shepherd, Allon. Powell, Stephen D., eds. Fantasies of Troy, Classical Tales and the Social Imaginary in Medieval and Early Modern Europe. Toronto, Centre for Reformation and Renaissance Studies. Schliemann, Henry. Ilios. The City and Country of the Trojans, the results of researches and discoveries on the site of Troy and through the Troad in the years 1871-72-73-78-79. New York, Harper and Brothers. Wood, Michael. In Search of the Trojan War. U of California PISBN A9780520215993. External links, official website, General, Troia Project and Seahus. Welcome to Troy. Troy. University of Cincinnati. Retrieved August 8, 2013. Archaeology, Institut für Quarter und Frauengeschichte und Archaeologie des Mittelalters, Universitätscurrency Quarter Bingen, DEU, and Department of Classics, University of Cincinnati, USA. Troia and the Troad, Archaeology of a Region, the New Excavations at Troy. Project Troia. Institut für Quarter U. Frauengeschichte. Retrieved August 8, 2013. Troia Project. Reconstructions. Troia VR. University of Quarter Bingen. Retrieved August 8, 2013. Heath, Sebastian. Teca Paragraph K, Billwork, eds Greek, Roman and Byzantine pottery at Ilion. Classics Department, University of Cincinnati. Retrieved August 10, 2013. Heath, Sebastian. Mansberger, Dietrich. Rose, C. Bryan. Elrott, John. Coins from Ilion. Classics Department, University of Cincinnati. Retrieved August 10, 2013. Rutter, Jeremy B. Welcome. Aegean Prehistoric Archaeology. Dartmouth College. Retrieved August 10, 2013. Lesson 23, Troy 6. Lesson 27, Troy 7 and the Historicity of the Trojan War. A. Geography, Thomas, Neil. Geology corresponds with Homer unregistered trademark S description of ancient Troy. Ardeli Archive. University of Delaware. Retrieved August 10, 2013.